A ingresso in sala il Presidente del Senato, Maria Elisabetta Alberti Casellati.
Buongiorno a tutte e a tutti. In primo luogo
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the President of the Senate of the Republic for the honor he bestowed on me on asking me to open this important event, which is, and we have Mrs. Turnberry here, and that's a high honor for us. And the President of the Senate will now open the meeting. Thank you very much, Madam President. Greta, can you hear the interpretation? Very good, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers here. They are very competent people, and their being here means that this seminar can be a moment when we focus on the environment and we study our concerns in depth. I would like to thank Greta very much. Greta traveled hundreds of kilometers, thousands of kilometers to come here, and without your courage, without your example, Greta, the road to bring environment to the focus, to the center, to the core of the international political debate would have been much harder and would have been a very complicated path. In the life of every one of us, there are elements that are different to others. And there are moments when we realize that we realize what our priorities are. We realize what are the things that we should fight for. And these are the moments when we have to understand what we should do. So before this year and a bit as the President of the Senate have been years in which I have been aware of disasters that have happened worldwide, natural calamities in Italy, in northern Italy, northeast of Italy, in the southwest of Italy, in central Italy when there was an earthquake, and in the northwest of Italy where when the Morandi bridge collapsed and about 50 people died. We have seen a lot of devastations, lack of maintenance, devastation, mistakes, and some of these events were caused by natural phenomena, but nearly all of them were more or less linked to the inaction of man. And the relatives of the people who died have expressed fear, and they often have protested because much could have been done to prevent these disasters. In all those places, hope was given to us from the rescuers, who are the angels that have given dignity to Italy and to our institutions. Now, what we cannot ignore anymore, and what we should not neglect anymore, is that these catastrophes are not a coincidence. They are not just bad luck. We have to turn over a new leaf. We have to leave a state of continuous emergency, and we have to invest in prevention, maintenance, restoration, reuse. All statistics show that natural calamities are growing, and that global warming is increasing too. The disastrous effects are being recorded not just for man, but for the whole territory, for vegetation, for plants, for animals. And Italy, as I stressed, emphasized on a number of occasions, is a beautiful country. It's a country we all love, but it is also a very fragile country. It's very frail. Beauty and fragility are the elements at stake in the present global challenge. In this framework, if we look at our planet, we are faced with a sort of summary of planetary, of global events. So the variety of habitats brings us into a position where we can observe the consequences of warming and pollution, and we see those consequences in rural areas, in the mountains, in the rivers, everywhere. It is all too clear that every country has to do its part, both in international contexts, and I'm referring to the goals of Agenda 2030, and in the development of domestic policies towards the achievement of those goals. But for too long, we have followed models of social evolution, of social developments that totally neglected the environment, respect for the territory, and the life of the planet. That is why the efforts made over the last few years, and these efforts were also significant. I'm thinking about the increase in renewable energies. So all this seems to be very little with respect to the crucial challenge ahead of us. All institutions have only one way to go. We should inspire public policies. We should model our public policies we should make them sustainable. And I would like to thank Professor Giovannini for what he's doing through the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development. And I would like to thank all those who are fighting to raise public awareness on what is at stake. We must let future generations receive the same opportunities, the same resources that we have received and that we can use today, or even more. Intensive exploitation of raw materials, hydrocarbons, urbanization, and reckless building development are all legacies that will make the lives of our children and of our grandchildren very hard. Sustainable development means focusing first of all on the quality of life, on social wellness, on the balance between economic factors and their circular nature, and then education, the fight against inequalities, dignity of work, social inclusions. In order to pursue all this, we are called to a double exchange, to a double challenge, a challenge that includes innovation and change. Innovation is the weapon we have in order to make our activities sustainable. From manufacture to new technologies, mobility, techniques for cultivation, all must change. The new techniques for energy production and everything in science has proved that people can be accompanied towards a concrete use of resources and support also a new cultural approach. And tradition, instead, is the legacy of a knowledge that was handed down through the generations, a knowledge that we must cherish. This knowledge has ensured a balance with nature that we need to rediscover. And my mind goes to all the hills in Italy that that can suffer landslides, and And I think the terracing was a very useful technique that has been used in many parts of Italy, and lots of agricultural land has resisted to calamity, to natural catastrophes, thanks to the work of farmers through centuries that have preserved their land from reckless urban development. And I think to the Tagliamento river basin, that is a model throughout the world. Innovating by respecting the best that the past has to offer is the way to lead to structural results. And in order to do this, we absolutely need a new social approach, a new economic and cultural approach based on the ethics of responsibility. When the environment is at stake, there can be no shortcuts. Mere economic interest should not prevail, and we should not use short and very short-term policies. Our house is on fire. This is the title that Greta chose for her book, and this is the most effective way to portray the present state of Earth of the planet. So, global warming, natural catastrophes that are increasingly out of control. Just think of the unimaginable consequences of the cyclone that hit just a few days ago Mozambique, and the fires that less than a year ago devastated Northern California, the tsunami that hit Palu in Indonesia last September, and where over 2,000 people died, and then desertification, drought, reduction of the polar areas. Or reduction of the ice cap in the poles, and also according to the UN, also according to a UN study, all these changes are wreaking havoc to the health of millions and millions of human beings. This cannot leave us indifferent. This cannot be accepted, and this is why I'm convinced that all the young people that are throughout the world, have took to the streets to defend the planet, their future, and the future of all of us. They are the hope. They are our hope. They are our reality. Our house is on fire. We shouldn't waste time. There's no time to waste. We all should do our part. And that is why I would like to underline a few good practices that have already been implemented here in the Senate. We have embraced the plastic-free project for the elimination of throwaway packaging. We use electric and hybrid cars in the Senate. The Senate cars are hybrid electric. All our buildings use low energy consumption light bulbs. A lot of paper has been saved because we're digitizing. Lots of services provided by the Senate. And here I would like to add my personal proposal to establish a joint committee of investigation on the soil at risk in Italy, in order to map risky areas in the country and to implement regulation to support territories that were hit by natural disasters and natural catastrophes. This bill has already been tabled, both in the Chamber of Deputies by Stefano Prestigiacomo and here in the Senate by Gaetano Quagliarello. And I hope that these bills may be debated, may be considered by the House, by the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate as soon as possible. And then please allow me, before I wrap up, two important announcements. In the framework of the activities that the Senate of the Republic develops yearly for schools and for school children to get them in touch with the Senate, starting this year, we have a new initiative for upper secondary schools because we want to give a Senate award to projects developed by schools to safeguard the territory. And then the Senate will develop a bicycle service to implement mobility in central Rome. Now, there's a lot to do, and with space and the time we have is not enough, and so I would like to invite you all to next year in the Senate to see if in the 12 months that have passed we have been all able to implement these first goals. Thank you very much.
Ringrazio il Presidente del
I would like to thank the Senate President for her words and for the commitments she has announced. When I started writing the speech, I thought unless you are converted, unless you become children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. This said Jesus, and these are very harsh words, and very harsh also are the words used by the Italian students during the global strike of March the 15th. They said, "You broke our lungs." That placard, that poster, was addressed to us. Because of the people who die in the Mediterranean while crossing the Mediterranean Sea, people who die in road accidents, and very often we forget there's 500,000 men and women who die, meet an early death in Europe, 84,000 of those in Italy, owing to diseases connected with pollution. They too can't talk anymore, and to them our young people are given a voice that we must heed. So much so that I believe we should build a monument for those people, as we do for the victims of war. And we must push the survivors to fight so that those disasters won't happen again. And in order to prevent future wars for water, food, land, and to ensure economic, social, and environmental situations and conditions that are favorable to all. For those reasons, the heads of state and government of all the world on 25 September 2015 met in the General Assembly of the United Nations and passed Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development with its 17 goals. And one of those is a goal on against climate change. And these 7 goals have been broken down into 169 targets, very concrete targets to achieve within 2030. This is an effort to define the future we want, a future we should build together without leaving anyone behind, as the slogan of Agenda 2030 says. Now, today, we are here in order to listen to those who are reminding us that we are leaving behind the generation that has no fault, the generation that is the most educated in the history of the world. Now, sustainable development is the development that enables the present generation to meet its own needs, its own requirements, without prejudice to the future generations. Now, if this is true, then it is no wonder that the young people are protesting for the injustice we are inflicting on them. And actually, we should thank them, because they are calling us to our duty. They are urging us to do our duty to mend this injustice. We adults, we experts, we who are the authority, we have to tackle the unsustainability of the present pattern of development, and we must make efforts in order to make our societies more equitable and more sustainable. And at the same time, we should invest all necessary resources to single out resources ensuring the well-being of everyone, in respect of global limits. Thinking that sustainable development is merely an environmental issue is a mistake. Is a mistake we shouldn't make anymore. The 4 pillars of sustainability, they say economic, social, environmental, and institutional, are all equally necessary. 45 years ago, a group of scientists gathered by Aurelio Peccei an important Italian that is maybe not well known throughout the world, who founded the Club of Rome, said that humanity was going towards collapse in about 100 years. So in around the 2050s, the analysis of the Rome Club was labeled as rubbish by the academic and political establishment. Now we know that that note of warning was absolutely justified, and we are now aware that we have to take action now, and that is an invitation that is being given to us by scientists from all over the world. And this is what we have now at stake. Thanks to the work started 3 years ago by the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, AVIS, that is now the biggest network of civil society in Italy with over 200 members. We have launched a number of initiatives. First of all, an amendment to the Constitution to insert sustainable development within the Constitution, to enshrine sustainable development in our Constitution, in order to enshrine also intergeneration equality. This has been already done by Belgium, Switzerland, Norway, and France, and other countries are about to do the same. In Parliament, a bill has been introduced to say just that, and it needs consideration. Then all bills should be adopted on the basis of the effect they will have on climate and sustainable development. We, in our organization, have proposed amendments to 2,000 articles of the budget 2019, and we wrote to the Prime Minister, to the speakers of the two houses of Parliament, to the leaders of parliamentary groups, to make preventive evaluation mandatory. And we asked the President of the Senate to support this change. And then we need to educate the world and all our citizens to sustainable development. We have to change mentality, we have to change behavior. And for this reason, we're now proposing the establishment on September the 25th of a National Day for Sustainable Development to underline the importance of the Agenda 2030, and sustainable development should be part of our daily work. And the media should do more, not just today, in order to focus on climate change and also to put climate change at the core of their activities, so that public and private decision makers act immediately in order to comply with the commitments made by Italy and by the European Union. And lastly, I would like to remind everyone that 3.5 years after the signature of Agenda 2030, the Italian government has not yet given itself a governance for the implementation of sustainable development policies. And that is why we would like to invite, once again, the Italian Prime Minister to do his best in this direction. The next Italian Festival of Sustainable Development, organized by our organization in Italy from May the 21st to June the 6th, 17 days, as many days as there are sustainable development goals, is an opportunity to involve the Italian society on these issues. And on May the 24th, there will be the second climate strike of Italian students. I would like to tell Greta and all students and all Italian students that in our country, in Italy, there are many organizations that are trying to change our pattern of development. We should make our best, because Italy has to do her part in this fight, in this battle that Italy will talk about. And history will either celebrate an epochal change, or history will maybe write about, we wouldn't like historians in the future to write about those who could have changed the world and decided not to. And that is our responsibility now. Thank you. Now, before giving the floor to Greta Turnberry, we have a movie made about her by the Cinema Experimentation Center in Rome, directed by Stefano Landini in cooperation with Rai News.
Manca l'audio, forse.
There's no sound now.
Change your mind, you lose. Don't look back, no sense in that at all. We may be down, but we're not through. Ain't through. Just do something, say something, want something. Do something, say something, want something. Do something, say something, want something. Waste your time, just do something right say something, want something. The world can change. Say something.
My name is Greta and I school strike until the Swedish election day.
Don't waste your time, just do something right now. Just do something, say something, want something.
Some people say that we are not doing enough to fight climate change, but that is not true.
Do something, say something.
Every single person counts, just like every single emission counts, every single kilogram. So please treat the climate crisis like the acute crisis it is and give us a future. Our lives are in your hands.
You only speak of green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular.
For way too long, the politicians and the people in power have gotten away with not doing anything to fight the climate crisis. But we will make sure that they will not get away with it any longer.
But I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. Today you don't win elections and get votes by telling the truth about the environment and climate.
Something, say something, want something. The world can change.
E ora è un grande...
And now I have the privilege to give the floor to Greta Turnberry for her presentation to the audience. Thank you.
You have to push. Yes, it's okay.
My name is Greta Turnberry. I am 16 years old. I come from Sweden, and I speak on behalf of future generations. In the year 2030, I will be 26 years old. My little sister Beata will be 23. That is a great age, we have been told, where you have all of your life ahead of you. But I'm not so sure it will be that great for us. I was fortunate to be born in a time and place where everyone told us to dream big. I could become whatever I wanted to. I could live wherever I wanted to. People like me had everything we needed and more. Things our grandparents could not even dream of. We had everything we could ever wish for, and yet now we may have nothing. Now we probably don't even have a future anymore. Because that future was sold so that a small number of people could make unimaginable amounts of money. It was stolen from us every time you said that the sky was the limit and that you only live once. You lied to us. You gave us false hope. You told us that the future was something to look forward to. And yes, some of us can have whatever we want, for now. Many of us can buy much more than we will ever need. But the only thing we really need is a future. And the saddest part is that many children are not even aware of what fate we are facing. We will not understand it until it's too late. Around the year 2030, 10 days, 257 hours, days, 10 years, 257 days, and 13 hours away from now, we will be in a position where we set off an irreversible chain reaction beyond human control that will most likely lead to the end of our civilization as we know it. That is unless in that time permanent and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society have taken place, including a reduction of CO2 emissions by at least 50%. And please note that these calculations are depending on inventions that have not yet been invented at scale, inventions that are supposed to clear our atmosphere of astronomical amounts of carbon dioxide. Furthermore, these calculations do not include unforeseen tipping points and feedback loops like the extremely powerful methane gas escaping from the rapidly thawing Arctic permafrost. Nor do these scientific calculations include already locked-in warming hidden by air pollution, nor the aspect of equity or climate justice clearly stated throughout the Paris Agreement, which is absolutely necessary to make it work on a global scale. We must also bear in mind that these are just calculations, estimations. That means that these points of no return may occur a bit sooner or later than that. No one can know for sure. We can, however, be certain that they will occur approximately in these time frames. Because these calculations are not opinions or wild guesses. These projections are backed up by scientific facts concluded by all nations through the IPCC. Nearly every major scientific body around the world unreservedly supports the work and findings of the IPCC. Many people say that we don't have any solutions to the climate crisis. And they are right, of course, because how could we? How do you solve the greatest crisis humanity has ever faced? How do you solve a war? How do you solve going to the moon for the first time? How do you solve inventing new inventions? The climate crisis is both the easiest and the hardest issue we have ever faced. The easiest because we know what we must do. We must stop the emissions of greenhouse gases. The hardest, because our current economics are still totally dependent on burning fossil fuels and thereby destroying ecosystems in order to create an everlasting economic growth. So exactly how do we solve that, you ask us? the children school striking for the climate. And we say, no one knows for sure, but we have to stop burning fossil fuels and restore nature and many other things we may not have quite figured out yet. Then you say, that's not an answer. And we say, we have to start treating the crisis like a crisis and act even if we don't have all the solutions. That's still not an answer, you say. Then we start talking about circular economy and rewilding nature and the need for a just transition. Then you just stare back at us because then you don't understand what we're talking about. We say that all those solutions needed are not known to anyone, and therefore we must unite behind the science and find them together along the way. But you do not listen to that, because those answers are solving a crisis that most of you don't even fully understand or want to understand. You don't listen to science because you are only interested in solutions that will enable you to carry on like before, like now. But those answers don't exist anymore because you did not act in time. Well, change is coming, whether you like it or not. Science doesn't care about unimaginable amounts of money or this comfortable lifestyle that you are so desperately trying to protect. The atmosphere only cares about how many tons of greenhouse gases we pump into the atmosphere. Greenhouse gas emissions, that's it, nothing else. Avoiding climate breakdown will require cathedral thinking. We must lay the foundation while we may not know exactly how to build the ceiling. It's like in 1962, when John F. Kennedy said that we choose to go to the moon and then do it within that decade, though everyone said it was impossible. It's like the Marshall Plan after World War II. Or like how, within 24 hours of the Notre Dame catching fire, people had already raised over €500 million to rebuild it. Sometimes we just simply have to find a way. The moment we decide to fulfill something, we can do anything. And I'm sure that the moment we start behaving like if we were in an emergency, we can avoid climate catastrophe. Humans are very adaptable, but the opportunity to do so will not last for long. And therefore we must start today. We have no more excuses. When I have been traveling around to speak in different countries, I am always offered help to write about the specific climate policies in specific countries. But that is not necessary, because the basic problem is the same everywhere. And the basic problem is that basically nothing is being done to halt or even slow climate breakdown, despite all the beautiful words and promises. The main difference is that some countries talk more than others about how good they are. But the truth is, there are no role models today. When I travel around, I often meet important people. And when they talk to me, they always congratulate me. I find that very strange. I honestly have no idea why they would do that. During the last 6 months, I have traveled around Europe for hundreds of hours in trains, electric cars, buses, talking about that we need to start treating this crisis as a crisis because we cannot solve an emergency without treating it as an emergency. In the last 6 months, millions of school children all around the world, not least in Italy, have been school striking for the climate. But nothing has changed. In fact, the emissions are still rising. And to be honest, there is no change whatsoever in sight. So why would they congratulate me? We children are not sacrificing our education and our childhood for you to tell us what you consider politically possible in this society that you have created. We have not taken to the streets for you to take selfies with us and tell us that you really admire what we do. We children are doing this to wake the adults up. We children are doing this to get you to act. We children are doing this because we want our hopes and dreams back. Thank you.
Ringraziamo veramente.
We wish to thank Greta very much for her words. And if by the end of today's meeting, we will be able to carry with us at least half of Greta's determination. Greta has been traveling the world to speak what is right. Well, if we will be able to feel that determination, then I'm sure that Italy will be able to make major steps forward. I will then continue according to our agenda. And Greta spoke of science, companies, businesses, and the young people. Today we have a very small but most interesting representation of these sectors, and it is my great pleasure to pass the floor to Professor Carlo Carraro, Chairman of the European Association of the Environmental and Resource Economy, who is also part of the IPCC works.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the President of the Senate for organizing this event today, and thank you to you all. I will try and give an answer to some of the questions that I am posed, that I read on the media, that I hear in the streets. So I will try and be very clear and tell you what, from the scientific research point of view, we have been doing. I'm also one of the IPCC vice chairman that is in charge of validating research work in the field of climate. The first remark is that, yes, climate change is here. It is not a future question. It is something that we must face up to today. Last year, we actually had $190 billion damages due to climate change-related events. Italy is only 2% of the world GDP. We, however, are a very densely populated country with a very fragile hydrogeological structure. So we have a damage that for Italy can be calculated up to 6 to 7 billion euros per year. So we are talking about a very major costs that we are paying. Climate change is man-made. Of course, I believe there is no doubt about it. Even those that were skeptical some years back nowadays must admit that climate change is mostly due to greenhouse emissions and man-made actions. the greenhouse emissions and the concentrations in the atmosphere are 410 parts per million. So for millions of years, we've stayed below 290 parts per million. Now we are up and beyond 410 parts per million. So this is something that should make us very worried, because we do not know what the consequences are. We are aware of this issue. We have been aware of it for the past 35 years. But in 30 years, ever since we have become aware of it, we have increased our emissions more than in the previous part of our human history. There is a contradiction here. We are on an increasing trend. We continue to increase if you compare what happened 20 or 30 years ago. Can we stop climate change? No, it is not possible, because a large proportion of climate change cannot be stopped. We have had a 1% increase in terms of global temperature, but in the Po Valley, we recorded a 2% increase. So this damage will continue to rise. It will go to 1 to 1.5% of the GDP. So we must act. We must act fast, or else things will continue to worsen. So we, all the countries in the world have agreed on stop to an increase of 2%. But if we do not act, we will go to 4%, and mankind will be at risk. We will not be able to survive. We can still adapt if the increase is limited to 2%. So part of the climate change can be stopped, but another part cannot be stopped. So we must act on the part of climate change that we can stop. We can no longer waste the time. Somebody said that it was too expensive to go from fossil fuel to renewable sources. Well, this is no longer a feasible excuse. This is not true, because to produce 1 megawatt by means of renewable energies can be compared with the cost that would be generated by using fossil fuels. So I believe that the price for energy has actually fallen by 20 times. We have technologies that can allow us to face up to the issue at really low costs. The IPCC says that the transition to 2 degrees would be only 0.006%, so values that we can accept. However, we need major investments. Investments are necessary because they push forward towards these changes that we need. We invested $400 billion in terms of acting as to the climate change. The IPCC says that we should have an investment up to $800 billion, but that can be done. We should stop subsidizing fossil fuels. Italy actually decided to do it, but hasn't done it yet. We should eliminate coal altogether. Italy said it would do by 2025, and we hope it will be done by then. All these actions can be actually carried out. The children are right when they say that we must act, and we must act fast, because our trend, today's trend, cannot be sustained. The Paris Agreement is the main result that we have achieved. Everyone has signed it with the exception of the United States, but if the agreement were to be implemented by 2030, emissions would stop. They would not decrease, but they would stop. But unless we make these emissions decrease after 2030, then the Paris Agreement would lose its relevance. So we must start a decrease in emissions right now, or else we will not be credible in the eyes of future generations, but also in the eyes of those who must bear the brunt of the situation. Allow me to wrap up by saying that we should leave this room by understanding that climate change is a cross-cutting issue that embraces every single aspect of our lives. So we should also include it in every single administrative and institutional action. Thank you. I would like to pass the floor to Professor Antonio Navarra, who's the chairman of the Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change.
Grazie al Presidente del Senato, grazie a tutti voi.
Thank you very much, Enrico. Thank you very much, Madam President, and I want to thank all of you. In the Mediterranean Center for Climate Change, we produce scenarios. We are the ones who are responsible to come out with numbers and scenarios telling us that climate change as a response to the emissions of CO2, and we provide the basis, the knowledge basis on which the IPCC works. And one thing we immediately understood when we put the center together, when we established our center, is that climate is not just a question of temperature. It's a much wider issue involving very different aspects of our society, different sectors of our society. Because once you understand that climate is not a stage, a theater stage that is unchangeable, but climate is an actor on that stage. And then you realize that that actor has effects everywhere. And so we have understood that it is an issue that cuts across a number of disciplines, and it takes all our knowledge to face it. Now, clearly, this is a crucial moment. As we said earlier, CO2 concentration is very high. There is direct evidence that they are at a higher level than over the last million years, and indirect evidence that CO2 concentration is higher than over the last 30 million years. So now the world is in a very, very, very peculiar scenario, and we see that extreme events are happening, catastrophes are changing, and disasters are ever more present. The Mediterranean, which is a historical, demographic, and cultural border, is also a climate border, and is a highly vulnerable area where the effects of these changes can be increased, and they amplify the existing conflicts and stress situations. So in the Mediterranean climate is very important. I also had the privilege to be a member of to witness the transformation of climate change from a small issue that was being studied in small laboratories scattered worldwide to a geopolitical issue. So this is a problem where science has a key role, and the scientific content of all this question is very, very high, both in terms of defining what the challenge is and understanding what is going to happen, what is happening now, and also in terms of understanding the mechanism and so devising solutions. We are reaching a point where we have understood what's going on, or some have the tendency to say, okay, we know what's going on now. Well, this is wrong. The only way to work properly is to keep studying, because it is true that we know a lot with respect to the past 30 years, but there is a lot which is still unknown. And I'll give you an example. Arctic warming can have consequences that we are still unable to fathom worldwide, and the ice melting in Greenland can have consequences that we do not understand yet. yet, and we need ongoing fact-finding efforts to understand what adaptation and mitigation policies can be implemented so that's the second part of the problem, the innovation we need in order to mitigate and also eliminate the problem of climate change. In all this, the scientific community is ready to do its part. We are ready to do our job, to provide timely information to all of us, because what is at stake is the future of our planet, the future of our communities. Let us not bet our fortune on this. Let us not gamble with the future of the planet. This is the only planet we have. We must act together, all of us, with a common intent, because we have to act with one accord. Thank you.
Grazie. E ora...
Thank you very much. And now Daniela Ducato from Zero, a Peace Architecture. Thank you.
Devi chiudere, no, il tuo. Scusa. Perfetto.
Okay, grazie.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the Senate for this invitation. I will tell you what we do as if we were farmers, because what we say, our words are important. We must transform our precious seeds into products. So please look at me as a farmer working in the building sector. I represent Zero, which is a production chain comprising several companies that work in different sectors, from engineering to interior design and fashion. We are talking about thermal acoustic insulators. We talk about mortar, glues, and lining, but 120 products that are made and produced in Sardinia with a 0 kilometer process are oil, water, pollutant, raw material free, because they are made only by our true residues, that is waste that are not used by other production chains, such as hemp, wool, cork, or even pumice, and actual residues that would be turned into waste unless we can use them. So these final materials become our raw materials, and they become renewable products that at the end of their life cycles can be reused. But their final the end of their life cycle means that they go back into the soil. If we were to do or act differently, we would absorb water, we would compete with food, and we would need 4 planets. So materials should not only be renewable, because they would not be sustainable. This is why we use residues. In our companies, there is one simple rule, that is no natural resource must be taken or grabbed, and in the end of the life cycle they must go back to the soil. So as I said, these are agricultural surpluses. They describe the path, and coming from the soil will go back into the soil. Obviously, this is not the place nor the time to give you the details of what we do, but recently we are producing smart biotextiles, some of which can absorb oil from the sea. They actually can be used to heal the environment and regenerate degraded soils. We have another product that we are very proud of, that is hemp biotextile, that only have a 2 millimeter of thickness, and they have the highest insulating power to be used in the field of fashion and clothing. And I wish to thank President Casellati because a month ago in this very room we were awarded the prize for innovation by the Presidency of the Republic, and it is most important that these innovations be acknowledged by our institutions because we feel encouraged. So these are just a few of our products that at the end of their life cycles actually become gardens that can be renewed, that can actually heal our soils. But we must be aware that not every single product can be made in such a way. Let's consider agriculture, for instance. The pipes that carry water are made of oil, of petrol, because it's plastic, and for too long a time, innovation has looked at the world through the eyes of oil, not through the eyes of the fish, for instance. There is a long way to go, and we are committed to go forward. We do not want to live in houses that are full of oil, resins, but also paints that use petrol. So what we are doing is to give alternatives, give oil-free products, so to encourage where choices. And now, speaking of the green industry, well, let me tell you that so far we have been having a muscle kind of industry, materials that were supposed to last forever, like plastic, steel. So I hope that we will be able to become aware of a different kind of sense, that of our limits, to produce oil-free products, because oil is the largest cause in the world of pollution as well as poverty. So if we are able to produce oil-free products, war-free products, it would mean that we are making an architecture of peace, an industry of peace. Thank you. We will now conclude our meeting with two short remarks by two young people. Ms. Chiara Falduto, the co-founder of the platform known as 2 Gradi.
On behalf of all the 2 Gradi team, the 2 Degrees team, I would like to thank the President of the Senate of the Republic for inviting us to contribute to this very important panel. In slightly more than half an hour, I believe we have already gathered an important number of messages that are key in order to understand what the path towards the change should be. We will say that again and again, over and over again. It is time to act. Maybe we should have started acting a few years ago, but we have a few precious years ahead in order to do something that could change things. In this framework, we at 2 Gradi, 2 Degrees, believe that there's another important element: information to the scientific community, to forge policies, but also information to shape civil society. This could, on the one hand, accelerate our path towards change, but could also contribute to make everyone a part of the fight against climate change. So in this sense, we would like to leave no one behind. And in order to underline this message, that is why due gradi, 2 degree is here today to emphasize that message. We are here today, me and my colleague, we are two young people, two young students acting on climate change. We believe we must do more. We must talk more about climate change. We must raise awareness. And the transformation of civil society that we have witnessed over the past few weeks has been impressive. Students have taken to the streets to protest on what's happening, and that has surely contributed to raise awareness on climate change. And this is the basis on which we all have to move from. But it is also true that informed awareness is key in order to raise awareness about change and to raise our awareness, to let our awareness be more ambitious. It is important now for the individual citizen, even in Italy, to gather information on climate change, because on the one hand it is true that science is producing massive information, massive data that are used in terms of that can be used in order to develop policies. But what we lack is information targeted at people who are not experts, because very often the information we find on climate is very complex. It's full of words in English that most people don't understand. Seneca would say there is not a no wind is favorable for the sailor who can't sail. Now, what we do here is we deal with climate change. We talk about climate change in Italian with a simple language. We base our work on solid scientific evidence, but we try to translate that work into a language that can be easily understood by everyone. So I see ourselves as a bridge between science and the person in the street. I believe that that is a way we can be a resource to raise awareness for this issue, and we would like that climate change, that is a challenge that for the whole world, will also become an issue on which the whole world is talking. And I'd like to give the floor now to Federico, also from the same organization, to add a few considerations. The microphone must be switched off. Thank you very much. This is Federico. I'll take just 1 minute of your patience because we are beyond schedule. I would like to thank again the President of the Senate for giving us the honor to be here today. I would like to add just one thing. The goal of our organization, 2 Degrees, is providing information and laying the groundwork for a constructive dialogue. Now, in order for this dialogue to be constructive, it is necessary to call a spade. And the situation is not a very happy now. It's not a very happy one now. It's pretty tragic, I should say. But we need to emphasize one thing, that the message that we have to deliver is not that we are facing a catastrophe, because this would lead to inaction, to people say, well, the problem is just too big, that there's not much we can do about it now. No, this is not the message we want to spread. The message we want to spread is that it is true that the situation is serious, but we can be proactive. And I believe that we are happy, we'll be satisfied if after reading one of our articles, a reader starts asking themselves, what can I do personally? What is the new behavior that I can develop in order to make the difference? Because rolling up our sleeves is the most difficult option. But if we want to win this challenge, if we want to win this victory, that is the only way ahead for us. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have come to the conclusion of our meeting, and we have 2 more opportunities to meet. First, tomorrow, Greta will take part in an event in Rome, and clearly It is an event that we are all invited to, and the second invitation was received by the President of the Senate. In a year from now, we shall assess how seriously, hopefully, Italy is dealing with this, and if Italy has made up its mind and is changing direction way more than we're doing now. And together with Italy, I believe, hopefully, Europe and the world. Thank you very much, Greta Turnberry, for coming to Italy to say these things, and have a nice day.
I gentili ospiti sono invitati a rimanere ai propri posti per consentire ai relatori di lasciare la sala.
Attenzione che ha ancora attaccato la presa elettrica. Io devo scappare, magari mi scrive, perché devo andare con il Presidente.